Welcome to today's episode of the No Greater Joy podcast. In our conversation that's about to occur, you'll hear a conversation regarding our fellowship of churches. And we just realized as we were discussing that we need to share some of the info on what these acronyms, these abbreviations stand for. And so you'll hear us reference the GARBC, which is the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, the OARBC, which is the Ohio Association of Regular Baptist Churches, as well as our Hebron Fellowship, which is our local fellowship that runs as far east as Northfield, as far west as Sandusky, and all along the lake here in north central Ohio. And so with that in mind, we really hope you enjoy the conversation between Pastor Steve and Sam Farlow and Chuck Pausley, and Pastor Steve has a word as well.
Yep. So let me just, what those acronym, the GRBC, ORBC, as you mentioned, General Association of Regular Baptist Churches. We talk about them in our Discovering Grace class as to what they mean, but just real quick, the general in the General Association is a geographic term. And so we would have, there's Southern Baptists, at one point there was Northern Baptist, and so general in the sense, these guys that came out of the Northern Baptist, these association is countrywide, so there's not just a local area. So that's the general. An association is you have churches that are autonomous and they're voluntarily fellowshipping with a group of churches. So that's an association. The association doesn't have authority over those local churches. So it's a voluntary, these independent autonomous churches that are voluntarily fellowshipping and associating with each other. The regular in the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, that's a doctrinal theological kind of designation. So these are, churches hold these regular biblical positions, not left-leaning, right-leaning, but this would be, these regular beliefs, the inspiration of Scripture, the Trinity, those kinds of things. And so these are general, it's an association, they are regular in their beliefs, and they are Baptistic. And so we talk about Baptist distinctives here at Grace in our classes as well, but they're Baptist churches, and it's churches. So GARBC is a general association of regular Baptistic and their churches. So these are not, it's not a fellowship of pastors or individuals and their churches. All right. And so the OARBC is the same fellowship, just in Ohio. And on the local level, it is our Hebron. All right. So those are the designation of what they are and some of the ideas or the meanings behind the acronyms. All right.
Yep. So with all that in mind, please enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, enjoy. Welcome to episode 16 of the No Greater Joy podcast, brought to you by the pastors here at Grace Baptist Church, because we want our people to know greater joy in their walks with Jesus. We want to equip our people being 24/7 worshipers, alongsiders, and go people, in which we're convinced there is no greater joy in stepping into these three areas. And this for this episode, want to talk about the associations and the fellowships that our church is participating in. And so to talk about that, happy to have, my name is Steve Strong, lead pastor here at Grace. Happy to have Ryan Adkins in the Timothy position here at Grace. And we have two guests. The first guest is Chuck Pausley, who is the state representative for the Ohio Association of Regular Baptist Churches, which we participate in. And we also have Sam Farlow, who is a local pastor, serves on the, I guess we would call it they call them like a council, but Council of 18 for the GARBC. participating in the OARBC and in the Hebron, which is a third. And so to clear some of that mud up, for us at Grace, there are 3 different fellowships, associations that we participate in. One is locally. We call that the Hebron, and I think there's 28 different churches, ranging from Norwalk, kind of a southeast of where we are at Grace, west to Sandusky, and then up all along the lake, so covering that kind of area. We also participate in a state level, which is the OARBC, Ohio Association of Regular Baptist Churches, as well as the national, which is the GARBC. So before we get into all of that, want to just welcome our guest, allow you to take a few minutes, just kind of introduce yourself, and we'll start with Chuck. Okay. Chuck Pausley. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. It's a privilege to be with you today. Thankful for the opportunity to be able to share. I am married to Linda. We have been married for 45 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And we're very thankful for how God has blessed us. We have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. And one lives in Ohio, 2 live in Iowa, and 1 lives in Texas. And we have 8 grandchildren, which we're very thankful for. We've been in pastoral ministry for 39 years. 39 years pastored here in Ohio, pastored in Iowa, and pastored in Florida. And the last 5 years, I've been the state representative. So total ministry time, 44 years. God has been very gracious to us.
Good. You've been a blessing to us here at Grace.
Thank you.
Sam, tell us a little bit about you. I'm not sure that you probably haven't met most of our people. Maybe a few have been down there to First Baptist in Strongsville. But tell us a little bit about Sam.
Well, I'm an ex-Methodist who got saved in college and ended up going to Baptist circles as a junior in college, and ended up at Grand Rapids Baptist College and Seminary, and then ended up becoming a missionary with ABWE in the USA. So we've done all of our missionary work in the States, and having never been west of Oklahoma before we went to start our first church, we went out to California and learned about the California culture. We have 4 kids. My wife and I have been married 47 years and 16 grandkids. And that's kind of why we're in Ohio, is because we want to move closer to the ones that were out east, because we have them spread out from Denver to Iowa to New Hampshire. And one of the reasons I'm kind of happy to be a part of this group right here, making this podcast, is because our travels as church revitalizers has taken us into a number of states. So I've not only enjoyed the Michigan Fellowship, but the Central California Fellowship, the Baptist Network Northwest, which is up in the northwest part of the states, a couple of local fellowships, the Treasure Valley Fellowship in Idaho, the Portland area fellowship, and then most recently the Denver area. The Rocky Mountain Association has less churches in the entire state and area than you have in just your council of 12, is it here? And so we only had 12 churches in the whole state of Colorado and Wyoming combined in the local fellowship.
Wow.
So I hope you guys realize how great a fellowship you have here at Hebron and all the blessings that you bring by the things that you do as a group for the pastors especially. But we've really enjoyed getting to know the pastors here as well.
Great. Well, let's start off with maybe the obvious question with these associations within we fellowship. Maybe Chuck, you could just start off. What are our fellowships? What are they not? And how are they unique? Sam comes from a Methodist tradition. Others Presbyterian. So share a little bit about what are these fellowships?
Well, it's very interesting to think through that as I've been thinking the last couple of days about this, is that I've been a part of the fellowship for the General Association my whole life. My father was a pastor, and he pastored for 45 years and was involved in the fellowship. So from a young child, I've been a part of the GARBC. And then also as a teenager, I came to Ohio. I moved here as a senior in high school. And so I've been a part of the OARBC for many, many years and really appreciate that. What's interesting about it is that it's a voluntary organization. There is no hierarchy. Yes, there is a Council of 18 when it comes to the GRBC, and I'm a part of that as Sam is also, been on that council for about 22, 23 years. There's no hierarchy. There are pastors and people of different organizations, part of our fellowship, who are involved with that. They are elected by the churches, just as the OARBC is the same way. When it comes to the council, we have of 12, which, Pastor, you're a part of, and we're thankful for that. You realize that it's all voluntary also, and no one is paid except for me. And other than that, people are involved with that. But it's a great fellowship of churches. In the GRBC, there's around 1,250 churches. In Ohio, there is 135. And when it comes to the Hebron, like you said, there's 28. Yep. So it's all voluntary. It's focused upon fellowship. It's focused upon doctrine. Theology is very important to all three fellowships, and it's there to encourage and to build each other up.
Yep. And so these are autonomous churches.
Yes.
So the GARBC, OARBC, and the Hebron have no authority.
That's exactly
over
right.
These churches.
Right. With my role as a state representative, I'm there actually just to represent, to challenge, and to encourage. I have no power, which I'm thankful for, because every church is independent. Each church has the ability to do what they desire to do. We have much diversity in the fellowships, both fellowships, but in all three fellowships. A lot of diversity, but there's also a lot of unity together because we have the same God, same Word, same Spirit, same Savior, and that's encouraging to know.
Yep. So, and both of you maybe can answer this. I didn't have this on the list of questions I gave to you guys. Maybe it goes along with this sense of how is this unique, because it is unique. You know, we're hearing in the news what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention. The Catholic Church has its organization, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist, United Church, they all seem to organize themselves differently, but the way you're describing our fellowship does seem very unique. I guess, first of all, is there another, I'm sure there are out there somewhere, but any other major groups of churches that organize themselves that way? And maybe why is it that we've tried to organize ourselves that way? Does that make sense?
I'll just comment briefly, knowing a little bit of the history of the GRBC and how they were trying to differentiate themselves from the Northern Baptist Convention, which had begun to slide leftward or more liberal with the scriptures and deny some things that we held to strongly theologically. And the convention had a lot of control over the churches, including owning buildings and property. So the men wanted to get away from something that had sort of grips on their churches, or even could dictate to some degree the kinds of things they taught, and move to something that would give us more freedom. And so as well, I came out of a Methodist experience, and there you had dues that you had to send in every year. And as you began to see on a national basis that the church was becoming, they were absorbing practical theology and practices that we would totally disagree with from the scriptures. And yet the churches had to kind of go along, toe the line, and send money to things that they were not supportive at all. So I love the way that this association has been formed for the purpose of having not only encouraging pastors and churches by way of cooperation, but enabling them to do something bigger than themselves by the way that they work together, without having the clause, so to speak, holding them, mandating something in their lives, dictating to them either what they had to teach or what they had to practice. And so there's great freedom within the context of having the ability to accomplish more when we do it together.
So, you kind of touched on a little bit about the history of how the OARBC, I think, was first, and then the GRBC kind of was forming out of that Northern Baptist Convention. And I don't know, Chuck, if you want to add anything more to maybe the history of how things began to organize.
It was interesting that what you said, Pastor, is true, is that the OARBC began first in 1928. So it goes back 94 years. You think that's a long time for a fellowship to be together. It started with 3 churches. Dr. Ketchum was a part of that, and a church in Elyria, a church in the Columbus area, and also I can't remember where the other church was, but they came out of the Northern Baptist Convention. Actually, they called it the Baptist Union. The Baptist Union, and what it was out of Des Moines, Iowa. That was a part of it. And the three came together and began thinking about what are we looking at when it comes to conventionalism. We don't want that. We don't want to be part of a convention anymore. We don't want the controls. There was issues also with the deity, question about the deity of Jesus Christ. There was a problem with inerrancy, and they just sensed that they needed to start with a new fellowship. They didn't look at it to begin with that they were going to actually do that, because they thought they could resurrect where they were, but chose that finally that they came out and decided to start a new fellowship. And to begin with, there were 32 churches that started with them in 1928, in October of 1928, and it's just amazing to think through that. And then on the national level, some of these men who were in Ohio were leaders on the national level, and in 1932 is when the organization of the GARBC began, and it was really based upon the same issues of coming out of the Northern Baptist Convention and wanting to have a strong theology, a biblical theology, and be able to also get away from the convention and become an association of churches that could unite together over Bible doctrine and fellowship.
So what would you, kind of get ahead of myself here, but I think it fits well here. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this type of arrangement of churches that are fellowshipping and associating with each other, but really don't have any kind of authority over each other? I don't know. So what are some of the strengths and weaknesses? I don't care who goes first, but what would you?
I'll just start with one that, as a missionary with ABWE, I find as a farm boy, we didn't like to ask people for things. And so to have to be a missionary appointee who would have to go from church to church or person to person and ask for money was a really difficult thing for me. And we don't do that as well as perhaps the Southern Baptist as it relates to getting folks to the mission field quickly, because they have a means by which they can have monies pooled from all the churches and send missionaries quickly from that pooled effort. So there's a couple areas where we don't do things quite as well, especially in missions work. I do like the fact that we are a group that we fellowship well together as pastors, and we then try to have the churches become a part of that as well in the fellowship. And although we have the ability to do some things well for the pastors, I think that we could perhaps, if we had some joint funds available, that'd be better for us. I like the fact that our association as a whole is moving in the direction of trying to, we're imitating a couple other groups. You know, one of them is Converge, that used to be the General Baptist. They've done some things that, as independent churches, not like the Southern Baptists, they're more independent, but they have put church planting on the forefront of their wish list. And as a result, they have become very church planting oriented and are doing a great job of getting pastors to the fields of both the USA and elsewhere. Because they're pooling funds, they're working with micro networks like we're trying to form. And so little by little, we're doing some things, I think, that are increasingly enabling us to be more effective in ministering to the folks as well as getting our funds together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of the issue that I see of our weaknesses is the area of finances. That really is an issue for us because we don't require our churches to give. It's all voluntary again. And as a result, churches choose not to give because it's not a part of their budget. They view it as the last thing that takes place. I can tell you from the OARBC's perspective that less than 50% of our churches give to the fellowship of the OARBC. And I think that it probably with the GRBC, it's even probably less than that. And so finances is always an issue for our fellowships to be able to continue to do strong ministry. And we need our churches to be more involved in that area of their giving.
What are some of the strengths of organizing ourselves this way?
One of the things I like is the fact that we have local fellowships that are able to fine tune what they want to, how they want to minister to the pastors, in such things as special speakers they bring in for local pastors' fellowships, the kind of the focus they have for the preaching element of state fellowships. I am really appreciating the fact that there is a concern by area pastors to assist in smaller churches that are struggling in looking at areas where church plants ought to take place, in how they encourage one another in such things as, I'll just speak from other fellowships I've been in. In California, we had a really strong Central California fellowship that, especially in the greater Fresno area, had some churches that met every month, pastors that met every month. And then we had softball leagues, which could be an asset for having unsaved players participate on the teams, and to be able to find churches locally that would be able to field teams was a good way for outreach. We had local Singspirations, which has kind of gone by the wayside, but it was a chance for the churches to get together and just sing and praise God together. We had missionary efforts in, like, for example, the Treasure Valley. We had 10 sister churches, and we would all work together to have an annual missions conference that would bring in multiple missionary couples and singles that could speak it at each of the churches for a 3-Sunday period, which was very encouraging to our folks. And then as a national group, we have the ability to endorse chaplains, so that when we have military or police or hospital needs for chaplains, we can endorse chaplains that we can send to those places. And as a result of that endorsement with other associations that have those endorsements, we can have more clout, if you will, when it comes to national strength in what we believe theologically, so that we aren't pushed around by, our chaplains aren't forced to do or teach things or, do homosexual marriages and those kinds of things, because we have a group of associations that all say we're banding together to say we won't do that. So there's some power with the national, as well as some intimate ability to work together on a local basis as well.
All right.
What I also find is that whenever you travel around the United States or travel around Ohio, there are fellowshipping churches. What I really appreciate is all of our churches, they're diverse when it comes to styles, when it comes to worship, when it comes to different translations they use. But each one of our churches is very strong on expositional preaching. And that's what I enjoy about our fellowship, is just to be able to know that there are churches just like us who believe the same way, who preach the same way, but are very different in their styles of ministry. And I think that's a real strength that we have, because you can pretty much know when you go into one of our fellowshipping churches, you can know what you're going to find when you get there, especially in the area of preaching and teaching ministry.
So kind of along those lines, Chuck, I know that you kind of one of that first face for people when they think about the ORBC or get introduced to the ORBC, and serving on the council. I know, there are churches that are applying, they want to join a fellowship with us. As a church is considering, and maybe you get introduced to a pastor or some leaders at a local church, what would be the reasons that you would say you need to join us? Or whether that's state level, national level, local level, how would that conversation go?
Sure.
What would you be saying to these churches?
Sure. That's just happened recently. We just met with a church on Thursday. Part of our council committee was helping to think through new churches. And a lot of what has happened is that churches are coming to us and saying, we need you. And so as I sit down with them and talk with them, we begin to talk about what we can do for them. When it comes to helping them financially, that's starting to happen now with some churches that have closed. God's opened some doors for us financially to be able to assist churches. When it comes to small groups, when it comes to our 10 area fellowships, that's very important, because I know this to be true, that The grassroots are there. As a state organization, we are together 2 or 3 times a year when we do different seminars, and we come to our annual meeting. But the importance of the church fellowships, the 10 fellowships, I challenge them in that area. We are helping them when it comes to looking for new pastors, when it comes to looking for church fellowships, those type of things, training. And that's what I really want to help them with. Just recently, a new church that's coming to us, they have not been part of anything, and they were very much alone. And they just said to me, we need fellowship with other churches just like ourselves. And so that's one area that we really emphasize on, is that we can come along and assist you. We can encourage you. We can build you up. We can give you help in areas of your ministry. But primarily what they're looking for is just like fellowship, like doctrine. And so that's what we do as a fellowship. Great. That's what I do.
Sam, what would you say on a national level?
Well, maybe I could talk locally first. I think that as a general rule, the fellowship has, as much as the fellowships that we have on each level is advantageous for the churches as a whole, the pastors really, to me, are the biggest beneficiaries of it, because when I first started with ABW and I went out as a teammate to start our first church in California, I was, as I said, an ex-Methodist. I had no real serious contacts. Plus, I was moving way out west, didn't know anybody. And the teammate I was with was real big into the pastoral fellowships. And he said, first time we have a chance to go to a California State fellowship or an individual local fellowship, we're going to go. And I said, why? I don't think we need that. Can't we just be ourselves? And as I went there, I have to admit, I felt like a fish out of water. I didn't know anybody. Nobody seemed to be that serious about talking to me. And I thought, this is not of any value whatsoever. Well, then as we got more connected with some pastors and as pastors started reaching out to us, I came to find that there was tremendous fellowship, tremendous benefits for being in the fellowship. And it started with just the fact that we pastors, we can be kind of lonely, and sometimes it feels like we're the only guy suffering through some certain problem in our church, or we have some opposition from some rowdy church member, and we're thinking, nobody's ever had this problem before except me, I'm sure. And then you get to a pastor's fellowship, and they can relate to you.
They all do.
That's right. And they were so greatly encouraging to relate to the situations we were going through and to give advice, give counsel. I love the fact that both on a local and a state and a national level, we had, as Chuck mentioned, we had good preaching, speakers that could come in and really minister to our hearts in a very special way. So as a pastor, I think even if you do very little as a church congregation, the pastors benefit so greatly from being a part of these kinds of pastoral and church associations. Plus, on a national level, especially as it relates to this group that we call the Generate, used to be called Baptist Builders Club. It's a group that does fund, bring resources together to fund needs that churches have, whether it's if they have a tornado come through or flood damage or something, and they can request funds, then we can give them a large body of funds either as a grant or a loan to help take care of that immediate need. We have funds that are available for church planting, and that means from the very get-go, before you even launch anything, you can have funds to have folks come in and help mentor you, do assessments of your group to know how to proceed, what you need to put in place to do a church plant. We'll fund half of the necessary advisory counsel that churches get as they're needing to be revitalized, and they need somebody to come in from the outside and to help them sort through what strengths they have and what weaknesses they have so they can move forward in a more positive way. And then we have funds for if churches just have some needs. We just applied ourselves as a church for, we need an air conditioner for our main auditorium and didn't have the funds for the $20,000. And so we applied and got a $12,000 grant. So there's all sorts of ways by which we are now gathering funds to help care for needs of churches and pastors as it relates to church planting and church revitalization. So for me, the biggest benefit was for the pastors, but there are lots of things for the churches as well on a local and national level.
Good. One of the questions along that kind of would be the benefit for we're going to have 100 people here sitting in the auditorium in our sanctuary. What is the benefit for each of those individual people, most of whom are going to be listening to this? What's the benefit for them specifically?
I can think on a state level, especially for the people of the church, of the men's ministries that are going on. In the state this year, 3 men's ministries took place. Man Up was here in the Hebron. And how many were here, Pastor, for that?
I think we had 220. Yeah.
220 that were there. Down in Bell Fountain, there was a great opportunity there to see that's gone on for a long time. Probably 300 men are there. And then I was up in the NEO this year, and this is the second year that they've done a men's ministry. And I just thought it was exciting to see 600 men come together in our state fellowship and enjoy good preaching, good fellowship, and just enjoy being together. That was very important. When it comes to our ladies' ministries, I think what's really neat is that they're still missionary minded, and they have different area fellowships. They have an annual meeting for that. They have also a retreat that they go to for our women. I think about our seniors in our fellowship. We're going to Camp Patmos in September this year, and it's just there for the senior adults. What a great opportunity to come together to go to our camp. Many of our seniors haven't been there for years. If not, they've not been there before. And to get to ride over on the boat across Lake Erie to the camp at Camp Patmos, and looking forward to those kind of things. But I also look at it from our annual meetings that we have are not just for pastors and wives. They are available for all of our people to come to. And so I think there's really good opportunities for our church people to get involved and find out that the fellowship can be very strong and very encouraging to them.
Yep.
On a little more less frequent level, if your church is able to come up with some funds to support missionaries, we have missionaries that tend to be encouraged by the associations to be a part of going to churches that are of a like-minded theology and want to reproduce the same kind of churches that would teach the things we believe overseas and in our nation. So as it relates to missionary involvement, it's very good to have an association that can both produce missionaries that would come from churches that have taught them how to minister and what theology to have. And then also, as it relates to if you ever need another pastor, which hopefully this church will never have their senior pastor leave, but if they ever needed to find another lead pastor or any pastor, youth pastor, then we have schools that have been encouraged by our association to find graduates from them and find pastors from churches that are from our association, so that you know what you're getting when you call a man to come and be your next pastor. He'll have the same doctrine and have some degree of the same kind of practices as you would desire for your future pastor.
Yep.
Another areas too is our camps. 3 camps in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's amazing, those camps. I appreciate so much Souda Hills, Skyview Ranch, and Camp Patmos, and the opportunity that we have to be able to have family camps. I'm speaking this summer at Souda Hills for a family camp, and also for our teenagers and also for our children. Great asset to be able to go to camp. Lives are changed at camp. Mm-hmm. I know that to be true in my life. I grew up in Minnesota, and Bass Lake camp that was there, and I made decisions there for following the Lord and full-time ministry. My wife grew up in Iowa, and she went to Iowa Regular Baptist Camp, and she made decisions for full-time ministry there. So there are many opportunities through our fellowships to be able to get from children all the way through adults. Great opportunity for ministry.
All right. Well, let's finish with maybe a little more personal question. What has been the greatest blessing, benefit for you personally? Sam, I'll let you go first. Let you put you on the spot. What's been the biggest blessing for you personally as being part of our fellowships?
I think it's the camaraderie of the fellow pastors, being able to find men that have been through the same experiences that I've experienced, men who can point me to resources I need, men who, when I meet together for fellowships, we can rejoice together, we can weep together, we can share things outside of ministry and spiritual things together, like sports, and really just enjoy the fellowship that we have together. And then to be able to see what happens when churches get together. Some of my fondest memories were from either the softball field, where we got together with other churches on the field, or when we had times to get together and just sing and praise God through testimony, Thanksgiving kinds of things, Good Friday kind of things, where we got together and rejoiced in the Lord. So the means by which the fellowship and the pastors helped me to have a more intimate walk with Jesus, by the things they encouraged me in, and to see the blessing of fellowship between other believers as they get together and rejoice together, just enjoying one another's company.
Mm-hmm.
Being raised in the fellowship, the GRBC, knowing Ohio very well, I would have to say this, that even through my education time, that I learned what relationships was all about. That's long-term, lifetime friends. I enjoy going to the conferences. I love the preaching, but what I really enjoy is spending time with friends that I look forward to seeing, and that's very important. To be able to rub shoulders, like even with Sam, and be able to rub shoulders with you, Pastor, and to be able to enjoy being together as brothers in Christ. We have such a rich heritage together, and I think about going back to Bethany Camp in New York, and that was where I met your grandfather. And then to be able to pastor down in Florida and be able to see the ministry that he had at Maranatha. And God just gives people in our lives, I think of men in days past who have all gone to glory today, who impacted my life. It was all because of the GRBC, because of the Ohio Fellowship, men that mentored me, that encouraged me, and now I have the opportunity to do the same thing. So it's great to be able to do that together, and we can do that through our fellowship of churches.
Very good. Well, it's a blessing to be a part of it personally, and for our churches. Appreciate the ministry that you guys have, what you contribute to these, and gonna ask you to stick around and record another episode. But until that,